cropping is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult things in composition, in my opinion. And if you master cropping, and by cropping I mean, frame your image at one go, which means framing the image or reframing the image in Photoshop like this. So if I wanted, for example, to recrop that, I would grab this edge here and I would try to, recrop this image in a way to create something a bit, something appealing, that's not as appealing as the original one. Let's clear that frame, give it a bit more space here, and let's see that. See, that's not good enough. Let's crop it a little bit higher here. That's kind of acceptable. I got this beautiful line going down to her neck. There's a very powerful triangle here, another triangle here in the front. That looks pretty decent. So cropping is really, really touchy art, okay? It's really, you need to take some time and practice with this. It's not easy, guys. But it's extremely powerful because you can create stuff like this. You see, that's a combination of very shallow depth of field. It's about 1.4, 85mm lens, and a very aggressive crop. And it creates the illusion of 3D, okay? It's as if she's coming at you. And that's because of depth of field and also this, the compression of the long lens, and again the crop. The crop is what sells this image, right? It's very intimate. So cropping will allow you to create more intimate images, but also will allow you to fit images in a frame that normally wouldn't fit, like this one. If I wanted to frame this gun horizontally like this, you see that leg would be too close to this middle of this frame. That doesn't really look good. That looks boring. That looks far more interesting. Fills the frame with this leg here in the bottom. But also what it does, it puts it in a Dutch angle, which means kind of slanted framing. And because this barrel now is diagonal, it fits, more of it I can fit in the image because diagonal lines are longer than the normal ones, the vertical ones or horizontal ones, right? So I can fit more of the length of this barrel here because it's diagonal, as opposed to if I was trying to do it horizontally. Also, that's not the main feature of this image, that's the main feature of this image. So I can crop this because I want to show off this, right? Same here, I want to show the back of a truck, not the front, because front I can see here. Also, the way I cropped it was really surgical. If you look at this, there is like an end of this exhaust here, you see that? I wanted to cut it off through this to the middle of this device, but I didn't want this line or this line to align with the edge of the frame. Neither I wanted this wheel, the inner wheel, to align or sort of show here, because it would bring too much attention to the frame. Okay, if I did something like this, for example, all right, let me just show you like this. See, this would pull way too much attention, which is why I cropped it in this fashion. Okay, it's very nice and calm, right? But you need to look at all the elements when you're cropping, and then if it doesn't work for you, what you need to do, you need to move your model about in the frame until you're satisfied with the way it looks in the frame, okay? Now, when you crop in Blender, what I want you to do when you frame in Blender, I want you to turn off this Passepartout garbage, okay? So when you go here to Passepartout, you can turn it on and keep it at 50%, but don't do this, because this will teach you fuck all, okay? This will not teach you anything about framing. You need to see the entire environment and all the elements of it, especially if it's busy environment, because, if it's a plain background, it doesn't matter, but if it's a busy environment and you're creating some larger, scene and there's a lot of elements in it, you really want to see all the elements that are around it, because you never know what you want to, or, exclude, or what you want to include. You see what I mean? When you do that, you can't see that. You want to keep it open. This is why when you shoot photography, you want to keep both eyes open. You don't close an eye. You just keep them both open, especially when you're shooting, street photography, because you want to see what the hell is going on around you, right? Street photography is all about story and moments, okay, grabbing the moments. So you might miss something that's happening outside, but doing that, will not teach you to look at the entire frame. You need to look at the entire frame to be able to learn how to crop properly in frame, okay? So you don't have to do it later on in Photoshop, right? Like this is actually shot straight from a camera. I mean, it's edited, obviously, but what I'm saying is it wasn't recropped. This is how I shot it. So that's really, the same here. I didn't recrop that. This is actually an image from a camera. So you need to learn the same with this one. You need to learn how to frame, how to use elements in the image to frame whatever you're shooting, and then learn how to crop things to make it look natural. So for example, you don't want to, there are certain rules of cropping. You don't want to crop people at their joints because they will look unnatural. Okay, so when you're, for example, shooting a portrait with someone standing, you want to cut them at thighs, you want to cut them above the waist, you want to cut them below the neck, you want to cut them somewhere through the forehead. You don't want to cut them at joints because that will just look very unnatural. That's a very common mistake done with hands and all that, but it also goes to 3D and any type of art. So for instance, if you think about it, right, if that's a joint, you don't want to cut it, at the joint. You want to cut it below the joint, right? You want to cut it below this joint. You don't want to cut on elements like, for example, you don't want to cut it in here, cut it in here, or cut it in here. You want to cut it in the middle, okay? In the middle. You know what I mean? Like somewhere here. That's why I didn't cut it in here. I cut it in here or lower because that's a joint. So you can apply the same that you do with humans, to like in photography to 3D. Because again, if you think about this gun, okay, I always think about my models as a person. That's a face, that's a front, that's a back, okay? So I need to give him more space here than here. That's a bottom, that's a top. So I need more ground than top, right? Although it depends, but see what I mean when I'm going with this, right? So if these are joints, well, don't cut them because it's gonna look weird. I'll show you. If I did this, right? Okay. Well, this looks retarded. She looks like she's been buried in sand or something, okay? So you need to give space. Now, in terms of portraits, I always leave less space here than the bottom. So this space here is always larger than the top one. That's a rule, and it always works because it looks more natural. See, like there's a tiny gap here, larger gap here. If that was shot this way, this just doesn't work. It looks retarded, okay? It looks just dumb. You need this space in the bottom because you need to position something in your frame. There needs to be a ground. So when I'm shooting, for example, vehicles or whatever, people, there's always a lot of standing ground. You want to give them ground to stand on, and it should be bigger than the one that's on the top. It's a very simple rule to follow, but if you do that, you'll make anything you shoot is going to make it more natural. Look at this, more ground on the bottom, on the top. That's a face. It's facing this way. I mean, it's such a simple rule, guys, but if you apply that, it just works. Look at this. That's a knife, right? Well, where's the face? The face is here. We'll give it more ground, right? Give it more space here. It's a tiny difference than here. This one is smaller, right? That's actually breaking the rules because the face is here, but I'm giving more space here. But the reason for that is because there is a more intricate design here, right? So you can break the rules if you know what you're doing. But generally, okay, when you shoot something, I don't care what it is. Look, more space here. Look at this, right? There's more space in the bottom than on the top. And again, that's a face. So it's going to be more space here on the left and on the right because that's a face. And I can do it with anything. Could be a pudding, okay, doesn't matter. There's going to be a face. I'll find it. So this will allow you to understand it a bit better and sort of make sure that you're cropping in the right way. So again, don't crop joints, right? Or don't cut through weird elements along the lines like this, You don't want things to touch one another. You want to crop through it like this or like this, This would be a decent crop, right? Like that. See what I mean? It's offset 70-30, right? And you're cropping through this kind of like a turbine inside. You're not cutting, along this circle here. You're not cutting in the middle of this thing because that's boring. You want to offset this thing. Some are here, right? See what I mean? Some are here, right? Or like this. So always look at all the elements in the image, everything. You need to take everything into consideration, which is why, again, I suggest you don't do that, okay? That's important. This would be my tip on cropping. You should practice it because it's a very powerful technique and you can create some really fantastic images by cropping. If I'm going to go back to my ArtStation, let me see if I can find you a good example. So this will be a good example of cropping, guys, right? Where you cut below the joints. You leave a bit of space here if you want to. You crop the top, but in a way, you're not kind of aligning the cut with all these kind of like, this circular line, the end of this one. And then there's a bit more space on the left, right? But you don't need to see the entire gun because you can see it in here. So this gun is not as important as this one here, the first one. And this one can become a framing for the entire mech. This gun here becomes a framing for this, for this head. The head is offset to the right, right? 70-30, rule of thirds, it's in the top corner. And it fills the frame with a bit of a negative space for the signature here. So that's how I would frame, a bit more complex objects. So try to play with it and try to feel it, okay? Try to do it slowly, This is why when I teach photography, I teach everyone to use tripods. I don't care if it's sunny day. I don't care if your camera can snap it. I don't care. The tripod is there to slow you down. And this is why here in Blender, when you frame in Blender, right? So when you go to Blender, what I want you to do is I want you to take your time and I want you to play with your framing, okay? Just, try different things. Align it down, align it up. Move your camera, shift your angle. Move it to the other side, see how this looks. Go low, go high, okay? Move your object. I don't care, do anything, but keep playing with it until you're satisfied, okay? So don't just put things in the middle like a Muppet, and just render because, you can't be bothered. Play with this thing, offset it. Try to crop it, like this, create something interesting, right? Rotate it, see which rotation works for you, which angle works for you. For example, this would be a good crop for this cube. You could put another cube in here, offset it, right? And this could be a good render, right? See what I mean? You need to play with all the elements. But when you're going to do that, when you're going to turn off this Passepartout here, you can't really see that. Because you can't see this element that's poking outside of the frame. How much of it is poking outside? You need to see that to be able to catch the whole balance. And this will be more difficult, yes. Your knowledge is going to be deeper and more intuitive rather than technical, if you know what I mean. Because composition is intuitive, guys. You can apply all kind of math to it, rule of thirds and all that. But the key is to break these rules. That's the key. You learn the rules to break them. This is why we have slang in languages, because it's breaking the rules, but it works, right? Because it's a live language. You see what I mean? It's more interesting. It's not so pure, not so boring, not so plastic. It's a live language. The same with composition, guys. It's the same rule. So you need to take everything into account, which means you want to see these bits outside of the frame. Okay, that's really important. So play with the framing and learn the cropping, because it's an extremely powerful tool. And like I said, it's one of the most important things you can learn in composition, because this will actually, bring your composition to another level. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next one.